Good evening, folks. It's 6 o'clock and I see everybody's here. So call to order for the regular meeting of Windsor Heights City Council, April 5th, 2021. Roll call. Well, okay.
Series.
Mike LaFredo,
Here.
Susan Scaries,
Here.
Mike Jones,
Here.
Joseph Jones,
Here.
Therese Arms,
Here.
hi Travis.
Aye.
Who did I miss? Anybody? Okay. I just did roll call.
Okay, yeah, but sorry, I had my computer on mute, so I didn't hear you. And I was on the other screen, so
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
Okay. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Motion to approve the agenda.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Discussion? Roll call.
Susan Scaries,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Motion to open the public hearing on sale of proposed city-owned land to Casey's Marketing Company.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Susan Scaries,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Travis, do we get any comments or any requests?
No, I have not seen any.
Pardon?
No, I have not seen any.
Okay. Dennis, did you see any? Hearing none, I'll take a move to motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
You get both?
Yeah.
I raised my hand to speak, sorry. I didn't realize that was the call for all of us on the call as well.
Okay, would you like to speak?
I would, so Lauren Campbell, 1004 63rd Street. I like the idea that we're selling it to somebody that will bring in some income tax and some property tax revenue. I have some concerns with what that intersection is going to look like, considering that's kind of like the gateway to Windsor Heights for anyone traveling west on University. And so I guess my ask would be that the city holds whoever purchases it to a high standard to make sure that that corner, that intersection stays accessible and is attractive for people visiting and coming to spend their dollars here in Windsor Heights.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments?
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you can see me or hear me. I'm Deborah Tell. I live in Windsor Heights at 66 and Elmcrest. I think, obviously, to have the income come in, but my biggest worry is the children that walk to Windsor Elementary School. I think that it's a safety hazard to put a Casey's in there with the people coming in and out all times of the day. I guess I don't know how long they're open, but I have great concerns with the elementary children that walk that area.
We'll keep
So
those
I
in
don't know
mind.
what your thoughts are on that, but I just think that I would like to know what safety measures we're putting in there, because I just think it would be an unsafe corner for the children that walk to Windsor or that walk in that area.
Don't we have a crossing guard there that works there?
We don't, but the school district does.
Well, okay, but there's a crossing guard there.
But they're
Yeah.
not there all the time. Some of the children come earlier, some of them stay a little bit later, so the crossing guards are only there certain times of the day. So if there's any activities before school that they're coming to or after school, there's not a crossing guard at that time.
But is there a crossing button to get the light to,
Say that again.
is there a button to push that allows people to walk across?
But that doesn't always mean that it happens. It doesn't mean that the people
No,
driving
I'm not asking that. The question is just real simple. If there is one.
I
is there-
believe so, yes.
Okay, that doesn't negate the fact that there still could be problems there.
Yes.
We'll make sure that those issues are considered when it gets to P and Z with the.
So is the
site
vote
plan.
tonight to vote that we sell the land, we as Windsor Heights? Or does it mean that we're still discussing this and no decisions will be made until all of these
No, it will
issues have been,
be,
or concerns have been?
the resolution will be on the table immediately following this public speaking, and we authorized it once before. This will be the second time because they wanted an extension. So this is granting them an extension.
So I've lived in Windsor Heights about 17 years. I never get on a Zoom call. I have not attended any meetings because I trust what our city council does. So I want you to know how important I think this is, that this discussion be made for the safety of our children. And so I just want you to know that I do take this very seriously, because I trust what all of you do. That's what we voted you for. But this is an important issue. I had the same issue not it was an issue, but when St. Teresa's and Windsor, they would do things together, and how important it was that the parking and the shared parking lot, or Kohl's a few years ago when they were discussing their driveway and how important it was for children. I worked at Blank Children's Hospital for about 18 years, and I understand the consequences of children getting hit by cars. And so I think this is an important issue. People are buying beer, alcohol, coming in and out of there. I just want you to know that's my biggest concern with putting that there.
I understand a lot. I'm a former 30-year educator. And,
Okay.
And serve as liaison for Windsor Heights with the Windsor Heights schools that are in our area.
Yes.
So I can relate to all that. And Dave, when we get to the motion, I think there could be a caveat added to that motion to determine what safety measures are being provided for children.
It also could be some of our elderly. I live here, I see, even though children are extremely important, but what are the safety measures of making sure that because a lot of people walk that part of the area in Windsor Heights, and there isn't sidewalks on that one area going south. And so I don't know. I just think it's an important safety issue to talk about, especially children, but probably for all people.
As far as the site plan goes, we have no sort of clue as to, what it looks like, what they're going to be building or designs like that. Is that fair?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and
Go ahead.
Council, the process that we're currently following is waiting for them to submit their site plan so we have something to look at. And all of these issues that have been brought up tonight will be considered when the site plan is brought to staff. So when we see that site plan, we will be reviewing all of these issues, holding them to the development standards that the city has established, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission will be seeing this. There will be a public hearing and there will be a public discussion about everything that's going into the site plan.
Dennis, I would recommend, I would ask you to, when that site plan is available and discussions happen, that the resident that's speaking to us tonight. I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry. But
Debbie.
to be informed about that.
What we typically do, Mike, is the staff reviews the site plan before anything's made public, because if there's a long list of things that we want changed, we want to give the applicant the opportunity to change those. And this might be one of those issues, a pedestrian crossing at the corner. So once the site plan has been submitted in its final form to us, it is definitely made a public document, and it's scheduled on the P&Z's meeting.
Dennis, let me rephrase it. Maybe I wasn't clear. I would ask, since this resident took time to come in tonight and speak about it, that you take her name and contact information and let her know when that is going to be discussed after you've gone through the staff, whatever the staff does. So
Absolutely.
okay.
I would really like that. My other question is, why aren't we selling the 63rd and Hickman property right there in the corner? Because
We
that
don't
seems
own
like
it.
we don't own it.
Nope, we
Really?
sold that several years ago.
Okay, that would be, it seems like we have a lot of gas stations in that pizza with the come and go and the Casey's down the corner. And so, but yeah, I would very much like to be included in that. Is Susan Scary's on?
Yes, she is.
Okay, she could have my information. I can get it, or I can.
Dennis, I'll make sure to get you Debbie's information.
Okay.
I have email and everything, so I'll make sure to get that to you tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be good. I'm a little hesitant to have those just announced in a public meeting unless everybody wants to get a bunch of spam.
Thanks, Susan, for doing that.
I'm a pretty reasonable person, and but I would like to know the children are very important to me. I'm a mom and a grandma first. I'm a nurse. I work in Des Moines Public Schools as a school nurse, and so children are very important to me. And I just want to make sure that that our safety of our neighbors and the children that are walking are good.
I would applaud you for that. So you're right on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And you can see
Deborah.
I never come on these. I never join you because this is important to me.
Well, you did fine. Thank you for
Yeah.
joining.
Well, I'm very much interested in what's going on in Windsor Heights. I love Windsor Heights, and it's important.
Good, thank
Keep
you.
loving it. We love
Got
having you.
any other comments?
Yes, Bob Bishop at
Bob.
1128 64th Street. I had 3 questions. There's only 2 left now. 2 comments I think the council will be interested in, and 2 questions. The first is a wise old man once told me, you don't know what you don't know. So that's why I have the questions. For 25 years, I've watched turkey vultures, a large raptor, larger than an eagle, nest on the pine trees up there during the months of March and September. And they do that at those times of the year because they don't come up till March because the critters are still frozen on the road and they're on their way back in September. So there's something you might not know. The first question I have is the sale agreement that you have before the council today. Is this in addition to the documents on 131 on the subject to purchase agreement signed last year? Is that still in effect? Or is this a separate sale agreement?
Those are still in effect.
Thank you. Second question is, when does the council have any idea when they expect the Presbyterian Church to complete the sale of the remainder of that property up there?
That's been up to due diligence on the part of Casey's. They asked for a 30-day extension. That's what we're discussing now.
And so we give them the 30-day extension. What is the council's expectation to complete the sale? We just let it go for a couple more years?
No, I wouldn't think we would.
Mr.
So
Mayor,
what is your,
The
What's your
majority,
expectation?
the majority of the property, Bob, is belongs to the church. They're in the controlling issue. We just have the one little corner.
okay. And the
Mr.
third question has been answered already, and I appreciate that. I understand a site plan has not been submitted. We look forward to seeing that. The last comment I have is a don't know, you don't know. So hopefully this will be helpful to the council. 18 years ago, Quick Shop approached the houses just south of that to purchase them. And a petition was submitted for both directions. As it turned out, I think Mayor Sullivan was the mayor at the time. Over 95% of the residents within 300 feet disagreed with that, did not want it. The council listened, it did not happen. That same survey was taken recently here. And with the owner occupied houses, most of the folks are aware of the comprehensive plan the city has, and that's a credit to the city and communicating to your citizens. Given their druthers, it was almost unanimous that they would prefer Casey's or what was presented in the comprehensive plan. So I just want to give that feedback to the council, and I look forward to working with the council in the future in the planning and zoning. Thank
Well,
you.
that's positive then, Bob.
Yeah, I was surprised. Basically, they said, you know, it's the less of two evils. We'll take the Casey's.
Well, I don't know about evil, but
It's a democratic, I don't agree. It's a democratic society we live in. So I hope this works out well for the city. And I'm sure you the planning and zoning will do their due diligence and takes the citizens' concerns regarding this development, if it should ever happen.
good.
Thank you.
We will. Thank you. Any further comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Dennis?
just as a point of clarification on how this process is proceeding, the city did agree to sell the property to Casey's some time ago, and that purchase agreement hit its expiration date, which in the purchase agreement allows for an extension, and that extension was done last fall. Now Casey's has come up again to that deadline, which was the last day in March, and they have asked for another 90-day extension, which is allowable under the purchase agreement. Now, keep in mind that Casey's only intends to follow through and conclude and close on the transaction if they get an approved site plan. So when they submit their site plan to the city and it goes to P&Z, if it does not get approved by the P&Z or the city council, then Casey's has no intention to move forward with closing on that sale. So there still are a number of steps to happen in between. And certainly there are at least 3 more public hearing opportunities for the community to comment on this process as it goes along.
Dennis, is the church willing to sell their part of it?
Yeah, Mike, you know, that's a private transaction between the church and Casey, so the city doesn't have anything to do with it. But Dave and I did meet with the church leadership. That was back in the fall to get an update on where they were on their process, and they indicated that they're moving full steam ahead, and they're also closing on purchasing a couple of other properties to make that parking lot possible. But they could give us no concrete dates or timelines for when they might have that done. And I can certainly appreciate that with COVID and everything, it's just slowing down.
Well, they're consistent. I talked to them last,
Yeah.
when this all started. So, yeah. Good.
We have no further comment. I need a motion to,
If you don't mind, I have a couple questions.
go ahead.
This
Hey, I like the van.
And thank you. I would like to say it was from college, but that didn't survive. 6518 Allison Avenue. I'm just, I hate to eat a dead dog, but I'm kind of curious as to what we're gonna do to finish up our street this year. Hopefully get it done by the end of fall. The east end of this street, I walk around the street, I walk around the block, and I've noticed still some issues down there. Other than, I mean, not including the obviously landscaping. I noticed a gas main exposed, bunch of wires exposed. It's like got red duct tape or red vinyl tape around it or something, which to me that's kind of a bad sign. I know that they have a lot of things that they need to have done at that end, but it was my understanding, and in order for them to get all the attention at the east end of the street that they need, it was my understanding when this project started that the west end of this street would be completed first, and our end is not completed. the corner of across the street from us on 66th and Allison, their corner is still a long way from being completed. I don't think our yard is been done satisfactorily. Grass can grow there, but it's not the way. And I'm not asking for it to be better than it was, but to be like it was, I think is fair. But I would like to see our end get done so the east end of the street can get all the attention that they deserve. I'm just wondering if somebody can fill me in on the plans for this.
Well, you're a little ahead of your schedule here. We've got some discussion on some change orders and street improvements coming up a little bit later. Can you hang in here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, this is a public hearing related to the sale of a Casey's.
Gotcha. I
Sure,
just
so-
did jump. I jumped ahead of myself.
That's
Always
fine.
ahead of myself. Always ahead of
We'll wait a few minutes and we'll come back to you.
Okay,
Okay?
thanks.
Okay, motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Susan Skiris,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
yes,
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Next item on this is the consideration of resolution 2021-13, authorizing the sale of city land to Casey's Marketing Company. Motion to approve.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion further? Roll call.
Actually, if I could just jump in here real quick. So after hearing the public talk, we will be receiving information, all of this will go to planning and, multiple different steps in front of us so that the citizens can have impact, like the input that they would like into this kind of how things work. Casey's like the crossing and, anything that we could do to protect the vulture habitat. I don't remember what they were staying in, like the evergreen or whatever. But things like that. I know that Casey's was not really, a convenience store was not really my first real pick to be there, to be very honest. But I came in here and when I started on council, it was basically said that we had talked with the church and as the city, we weren't going to stand in the way of them selling their property. So that's kind of where I'm at. This is not my favorite thing, but I also don't want to go back on what other city council members have said to the church. So I just hope that we can make sure that we get in touch with people who have the concerns and kind of sit down with them so that we can address the concerns so that, this makes everything go smoother and Casey's is, well liked and kind of well used in the city.
Any further discussion?
This is Teresa. I would just note that I've also had a lot of issues with the crossing of the street there on 63rd Street along the different points. I've tried to work with the Coles family, or the Coles family, I'm sorry, the Coles Elementary to deal with the crossing. So I appreciate the concerns that have been brought forward. I do believe that there are crossing issues there. I know that we had an incident within the last 30 days crossing of 63rd Street with a young man who got hit. I think I talked about it last time at the other end of 63rd Street. And so I just appreciate that those issues are being raised and they're of great concern. And I think we need to be doing more just as a whole on that street. So I just want to thank Deb for bringing those forward.
And I want to echo what Teresa just said, since I'm a resident of that street and I cross that street quite a bit, so I get it. I'm also the home host for about 65 or 70 turkey vultures in my pine trees. So I also am aware and familiar with that in my own trees. So I get it, and I think that'll be part of our conversation. So thanks for Deb and for the other gentleman for your comments. I really appreciate it.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Susan Skiris,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes,
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is public forum set aside for public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. Mr. Fatino, if you'd like to speak now, go ahead.
I was just curious as to the progress on our street. I'm sorry I jumped the gun before. I just get
Yeah,
anxious.
don't worry about it.
I'm just curious as to how the progress is going to take place. Like I said, I feel like our end of the street we were told that our end would be completed before they went to the other end of the street, to the east end. I understand their plan. I just like to see ours get done so that theirs can be concentrated and completed fully. Not seeing workers come back and forth. It's my understanding that they're going to resume this week, the week of the 5th, I believe. I hope that doesn't mean putting flags out on Friday or marking water lines, because that all has to be redone. And like I said earlier, I did notice that the gas main on the east end of the street, south corner, is exposed. It's wrapped in tape. It's got exposed wires. That concerns me for several reasons. I'm just wondering, with so much going on in the small community of Windsor Heights, what the progress is going to be towards finishing this little street.
Dennis, you want to take that one?
Well, he's correct that restoration work is going to resume again this week. And by the time that this project is done, all of the restoration is going to look just like what you see completed along Allison already. Dalton and I were out on site this morning with one of the residents talking about the different issues. There is not a gas main exposed to the public. There is a controller mechanism that is in the ground that will be taken into account when the backfilling is done and when the reseeding is done. So we expect work to start again this week. If there are any issues during that work, Dalton and I and Justin are always available to get out there and talk about those right away. So we're very confident we'll have all of that done to everybody's satisfaction yet this construction season.
Because I know our end is not done.
It will be.
That's right. That's what I said. They'll be back out to finish that this construction season.
And what is your construction season?
Well, it
I mean,
starts this week.
is that from now until November?
No. It'll be done well in advance of November, yes. But there are a lot of things that play into
Because I
that.
mean,
If there's
we
weather
were put off.
problems,
We
it's
were
going to
we were
delay.
put off so much. Well, we were put off so much last year. We had 3 rain days last year that work could not have been done. And I took vacation time to do stuff around my house. Never saw a soul here on these beautiful sunny days. I'd like to know I mean, can we count on it this year?
Yes, guaranteed. It will be done this year.
This year? Is that?
This construction season. You know, if you want to, I'd be glad to meet with you out on site, just like we did with Johnny this morning.
I'd be happy to.
Okay,
I'd
that's
be more
great.
than happy to.
That's great. And I think I see Barb Fatino as the name on the email address.
Yeah.
I did email Barb this morning the same information. So I'll use that email address and I'll communicate with you so we can get together. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I'll send you my email.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this stays, yeah, okay. And I'd be happy to meet with you.
Okay, we got that taken care of. Anything else in public forum? If not, Nick, go ahead.
My name is Jeremy Brennan. I live at 6425 Allison Avenue. I wanted to also chime in here a little bit because I have to agree what Mr. Fatino said. This is not something that has been completed on either end of the street. And like he said, it was going to be completed this construction season, but you also have to understand that as residents, we're getting a little frustrated with being told that this was supposed to have been completed by November of last year. And here we are in April the following year, and we haven't even seen construction workers coming out. As it stands right now, we've still got rocks in our yards. We've got things that haven't been completed along the entire street, not just the east end, but the west end as well. And to be honest with you, just being told that it'll be completed sometime this season, whenever that vendor has multiple contracts and seems to pull people away in order to get those things completed, it gets extremely frustrating when we're trying to take care of our property. So you have to understand a little bit about the reason why we are feeling very frustrated with this not being completed yet. On top of that, I would like to bring up an issue that has been happening along with some drainage that's been happening along our street that is causing some issues already with the end of our driveways. Luckily, I managed to fix part of it already, but we have a resident that lives at 6505 Allison Avenue who decided not to put his sump pump into the sewer system that he was offered. And we've been running into numerous problems of water coming back down the road again and pulling it into my driveway. And right before the start of the construction season last year, where they were working on Allison Avenue, this was a problem where it literally ate out the bottom of my driveway. And I was going to have to replace that before the city was getting ready to do the street repavement. So I still have a major concern, the fact that this is not being addressed by the city and taken care of. I'm not sure what else that we can do other than to bring it to your attention on the city council and ask for some sort of resolution to happen. I know that both Susan and Teresa are very well aware of the circumstance because we've talked to them last year about it. And I believe you've been in contact with Matt, my neighbor, Matt Weir next door, about this issue going on too, because it comes right down in front of both of our driveways and it pulls down at the end of my driveway. So needless to say, the people of Allison Avenue aren't exactly super happy right now.
And you're not the first person to bring up that drainage business, and it does need to be taken care of. I think it's on the agenda tonight's meeting to talk about as well. It should have.
I wasn't sure if that's exactly what you guys were going to be talking about or not. That's the reason why I wanted to bring it up during the public forum.
Yeah. Well,
Jeremy, that's it exactly.
It needs to be taken care of.
Agreed, 100%.
Any further comments from the public?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here. This is Vern Childs. I'm at 6502 Allison. And I just want to reiterate what he said about the drainage problem, because I do remember not this last year, but the year before, the city had to come out and chop ice out of that curb strictly from that drainage problem. And he had the opportunity to hook in and chose not to. And I think it should be mandatory. I mean, that's just the way I am. I hooked my pool into it. You know, I understood what the city done. You guys went to some expense to make it more convenient and to make a better street. I think it just has to be accomplished. And not only is it a problem for his driveway, but I think it poses a safety issue, a huge safety issue. The other thing that I wanted to bring up real quickly is the main sewers down that you guys repoured down at the bottom. I know you've got screens in there, and there's a good example of what that drainage has done. I've had to unplug those because when we had about an inch of rain earlier, I mean, I could see the storm sewer on the north side backing up a little bit simply because it couldn't get through that screen. And there's all kinds of leaves and everything that washed down from the north side. I've unplugged both of those. And I guess I'd like to know, one, are those screens a permanent thing? And if they are, they're going to have to be cleaned periodically. I mean, I've done it. My plan is to do it before we get this next rain. I want to make sure they stay clean so they can receive the amount of water they need to receive. And I don't know if Dalton's in on this or not. I've been going to call him, but I found out about this meeting. I thought, well, I'd just get on here. But anything you could tell me, I would appreciate.
Justin, are you on? Could you jump in and talk about those storm drains at the bottom of the hill?
Yes, those are just temporary erosion control measures. So if we don't put those in per their DNR permit, they have to protect all the storm sewer systems. So what those do is capture any sediment from the construction projects and not washing it down into pipes and down into the stream. So once grass comes up and whatnot, those will be taken out.
Okay,
so they are not permanent.
okay. So is that something, I mean, when I'm around here, I don't have a problem pulling them out and cleaning them and putting them back. But is that something that the city should be coming down and taking a look at from time to time? Because I noticed over on College, you've got the same issue at College. You know, they've got the bigger storm sewers also. And I noticed they've got the same screening system that we do. And I noticed that it's full of leaves. And it just slows the amount of water that can get in there. Again, my concern, I'm trying to protect my house.
Yep. Nope. Understand. They're doing what they're supposed to be and then causing other issues along the way. So per the contractor's DNR permit, they're required to have those in there. And then they go by and clean them out. It just kind of, unfortunately, that's what happens with those. They just, like you said, the leaves and stuff just kind of build up and then it doesn't allow all the water to get into it.
Justin, I have a question for Dennis. Can't they be periodically inspected by Public Works? So
Yes, and the contractor too. Yes, absolutely. It's incumbent upon the city to make sure that those are cleaned and inspected every so often.
Right.
Especially when we know we have a storm event coming.
Yes, and because it's great that the resident does that, but should fall on the city to periodically check those.
That's correct.
Okay.
One thing that should help is we've had the street cleaner out this week.
Well,
so that'll pick up a lot of the debris that's just kind of hanging there.
Boy, that'd be great. I haven't seen it come down Allison, but I'm sure it has. And I do appreciate everything the city's tried to accomplish here. It's not that I'm not thankful for what you've done.
No, I appreciate your comment. It was a good observation. I'm glad you shared it.
Thanks, Vern.
No problem. Thank you.
Anything further from the public? Next item is consent agenda. Motion to approve.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Susan Skiris. Joseph Jones. Mike LaFredo.
Yes.
Mike Jones.
Yes.
And Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Can I
Next
just,
night-
I
Go
sorry,
ahead, Susan.
I got asked who else is on the community events committee. Sorry, my computer froze up and my mouse wouldn't work and I couldn't do anything but sit here. So I just received emails asking who was on this committee, the events committee. Do we know other than the mayor?
I think
It's you and Therese and the foundation and the Chamber of Commerce are the first four on there. We have one application for a volunteer. If there are any others, please volunteer. If you've got something that says other people, Susan, there is an application up on the website that has to do, you just write in their events committee instead of public planning and zoning and whatever, submit it. Or
Okay.
call Whitney and apply. She'll walk them through it.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could
Yeah.
I add, Susan, it's really difficult. I've been putting a lot of work into trying to, craft this committee, and it seems like I'm doing it in a vacuum, and I'm very uncomfortable with doing it that way. So I think the approach that I recommended to Dave was, let's get some of the basic players in this put together first. So council appointees, the foundation and the chamber. And when they have that first meeting, you can kind of roll out how this committee is going to be filled out, how many people, where they're going to be represented from. And we want to have that meeting at the end of this month. And then hopefully we'll have a course charted that's not just Dennis sitting in his office trying to figure this out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just was wanting to make sure that I had the answers for the people that
Yeah.
emailed and texted me so that I could cross that off my list of questions to ask.
Okay, next item on this is Central Iowa Water Trails presentation. And we have, Hannah, you gonna do it or are you doing the introduction?
Nikki and I are gonna tag team this and I'll start it out. Nikki
Okay.
does have some slides to share, so if she can get access, she'll bring those up as I start. So thank you guys for having us today. We are in the process of figuring out the governance for Central Iowa Water Trails, but before we dive into those details, I want to take a step back and remind everyone how we got to where we are. Central Iowa Water Trails has been a concept that was outlined as many as 30 years ago and has come out of various regional planning initiatives like Capital Crossroads and the Tomorrow Plan. In 2016, the MPO adopted a regional water trails plan that also led to an engineering study to determine how we could use conservation and recreation to activate our waterways for residents and visitors alike. At the end of this engineering study, there were 86 amenities over 150 miles throughout a 3-county region that includes 17 separate jurisdictions. And these amenities range from anything and as simple as creating a pathway for fishing and wading, all the way up to some as large and complex as whitewater rafting. So beginning during that process and continuing today, this effort has been extremely collaborative and community-driven with inputs from dozens of discussion groups, town halls, and presentations. And throughout every step of the way, there's been participation from elected officials, city staff, and a multitude of community groups and interested residents. Throughout each of these conversations, it's clear we have an opportunity to activate our waterways as a regional amenity to improve our environment, enhance quality of life, spur economic development, and attract visitors and workforce. So why is this important right now, given all that cities are confronted with? We've seen the relevancy of nature and outdoor recreation over the last year, certainly, and even beforehand. We've seen a 200% increase in visiting to just our Polk County area parks within this last year. And as we look at what the bike trails have done for our community, we start to see why it's even more important to have a regional entity to help shepherd some of this forward, because water flows and it's critical to create a universal user experience for our residents and visitors alike, and we must be thinking about consistent long-term maintenance. So let's talk about the overall goals for the project. First of all, primarily safety. Certainly there's been 19 deaths on those low-head dams since their inception and numerous rescues, but there's another level of safety here. Paddle sports are the fastest growing segment of outdoor recreation, and we've certainly seen that here in Central Iowa, but we're not Colorado with those rocky shorelines, and so people need a holistic way to get on and off. Additionally, economic development. We've seen what the bike trails and outdoor recreation has done for our community, and we start to see what water trails could do. We did do an economic impact study that once these projects are built out, on the low end, they would bring in between 25 to 50 million of direct spending a year within the region. Attracting workforce and tourism is crucial part of this project. We know that we have a great place to live. We have a great education system and affordable housing with great communities, but time and time again, when we do interviews and surveys of residents moving into our area and residents that live here, having access to outdoor recreation and specifically water recreation is a top thing that people want. Environmental conservation is another goal of this project. Each of these 86 sites have water quality initiatives built into them. And then additionally, this project has allowed us to partner upstream and leverage additional federal and state dollars to increase water quality initiatives upstream within our watershed. And then outdoor recreation. Again and again, when we survey residents within central Iowa, they want more access to amenities within the region. So what are the benefits of a regional entity? First of all, having a cohesive user experience, including signage, is utmost important. Having consistent long-term maintenance, having a regional marketing arm and voice that goes beyond just our area and markets us as a whole. Public education and notification, being able to communicate what water safety means to each individual user and being able to notify users where they're at. Streamlining communication with the DNR, providing on-water maintenance, and funding back to the jurisdictions for maintenance and capital improvements. So what are the benefits to Windsor Heights residents? Certainly Windsor Heights has a great project within their own backyard there at Colby, and providing access to that creek is important. But additionally, it provides access to different experiences throughout the region, allowing for a varied user experience, whether it's within their own backyard or just a short drive. Enhancing the quality of life for Windsor Heights residents. And then increased visitors lead to additional funding through a variety of mechanisms. So what we're going to do next is we're going to jump into the details of the 28E and how we got to those details. We're going to take a pause and answer any questions, and then we're going to dive into the bylaws and pause for the governance structure of the actual nonprofit, and then pause for questions there. Because of the virtual format, it makes it easier if we take those two pauses to answer any questions. So I'll let Nikki get started.
All right. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for having us this evening. My name is Nikki Severson. I'm with Isaacson Severson Consulting and have been a part of this project in one way or another for a while now, but in this role have been helping shepherd the governance process. So what I'm going to do is tell you how we got to where we are right now. So building from the energy and excitement of the engineering study, an interim LLC and leadership board was formed to help guide the individuals through the capital campaign and the creation of this final structure. With that, the Water Trails group engaged in National Parks and Recreation experts to help determine what is the best long-term operating and governance structure for a system like this. There's 150 miles of waterways. There's no other system like this in Iowa or the nation. And so we wanted to get some best practices, but also hear from our community. And so those experts did interviews, surveys, and small discussion groups with our regional mayors and our city managers to find out what works well in central Iowa. What have we learned from our other regional entities, and what are values that we need to uphold as we build this system from the ground up? With all of that feedback and also looking at best practices in slightly similar models throughout the country, they recommended a nonprofit or conservancy model that has public partners. And there was a really strong emphasis on a public-private funding mix. So at that point, Scott Racker with the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center at Drake University and I were brought on board to take this idea of a conservancy model and see how can we put this into practice within central Iowa, knowing that we want to build this right from the ground up. So last summer, we conducted individual interviews with regional city managers and our county supervisors. We've had updates with the Central Iowa Water Trails Executive Committee and the Governance Committee. We've held a focus group with the private sector just to see what's their support ongoing. They've been incredibly supportive of the capital campaign, but we want to make sure we have their partnership moving forward in the long term. We are informing elected officials, and that's one reason, one part of the process of how we're here with you tonight. And then we formed a working group with facilitated sessions to build an understanding and also consensus on what this should look like. And both Dennis and Dalton participated in those last fall and last winter. So that working group was comprised of city managers, of county supervisors, and other representatives from the DNR and our conservation boards. They were charged with helping build consensus for the organizational documents, as well as the governing structure in partnership with the governance committee of the Central Iowa Water Trails. So before we dive into what the terms of the 28E are, just to take a step back, again, looking at the overall picture, the Central Iowa Water Trails, 86 amenities through 12 cities and 3 counties. We have our regional sites. There are 81 of those throughout the region that are owned and maintained by each jurisdiction. And then the downtown sites, which are 5 access points in or near downtown Des Moines. The ownership of those is being worked out, and those vendor contracts and operations will be overseen by the new nonprofit. And then this new nonprofit, which will oversee the regional network, those benefits that Hannah just talked about, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about those. And we'll have both elected officials and community representatives on that board. Then when we look at the funding, again, big picture, we'll talk details. The regional sites, that maintenance is funded by each jurisdiction. The downtown sites, before even the capital campaign was kicked off, a business pro forma was conducted to show that this is a self-sustaining model that will increase each year with revenues then going back into the system. The new nonprofit will have its own administrative and operation budget, which will be funded both by the public and private support. And the jurisdiction support is a part of that, which was determined by the working group on 3 weighted factors that we will share with you, and then share how that relates specifically to Windsor Heights. So that's the big picture. Now we'll talk a little bit more detail about that 28E agreement. First and foremost, again, what is this regional entity going to do? And the group came to consensus on a number of things. And really, it is to make sure we have a network of trails that's seamless and cohesive. Water flows, when visitors come, they want to know that they've got a cohesive experience. So this will include design standards, signage, public art, maintenance, vendors, and safety. They'll oversee the public education and the notification system for water trails. So users, whether they're residents or visitors, know whether it's safe to get in the water, what the conditions are like, and that's a centralized location for that. They'll oversee the marketing strategy to draw those visitors in, coordinate those regional events. And as Hannah mentioned earlier, act as a single point of contact for the DNR. And that was something that was brought forward by the working group that would really help the cities. There'll be an independent audit and a report back to jurisdictions. And also a key thing is that all on water maintenance will be conducted by this entity, because as we know and have said, water flows from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And then again, they'll oversee the finances of the organization, both in and out. Next, the working group defined a number of terms, scope, and what this agreement would look like that we're presenting before you in the 28E. So it is a perpetual agreement with a termination notification due by July 1 and a 2-year sunset. That gives us time to, or the organization time to answer any concerns and also prepare if a jurisdiction does leave. They came to consensus on the definition of what is a water trail, what is a water trail project that we are discussing, determine that all the water trail projects will be owned by the jurisdiction, and therefore liability is covered under the Iowa Code, which was a key thing there. And looking at the maintenance and standards again, so we have a cohesive network, the jurisdictions are responsible for the cost of maintenance and repair of their own water trail access points, with the new entity overseeing on water maintenance. They came to terms, what you'll see in the 28E agreement Exhibit B, on what are those best practices related to the hardscape landscape. How can we make sure that there's a uniform, agreed upon maintenance standard, as well as an inclusion design tool. So when these sites are being built, there are considerations when looking at our restroom facilities and accessibility to make sure we as a region are building all of these sites for all users. And then emergency response will be addressed within the statewide mutual aid compact, and any local mutual aid agreements will apply. Then we get into the funding, which is always a question. So there's two parts of the funding that we're going to talk about. First is the operation and maintenance of the downtown sites and how that affects the entity, and then the estimated budget for the regional operations and admin. So as I mentioned, before the capital campaign even kicked off, a pro forma was done to say, will this make money? Is it self-sustaining? Is this going to bring in what we think it will? And these were very conservative visitor projections that were based on Ann Arbor, Michigan. Not that they have a similar system to us, but they have a similar draw. So we're looking at a 4-hour range. And if you have questions on how all of this was determined, we have that background information that can share with you. But the bottom line here is, once all of the downtown sites are up and running, and the expenses are included in here, with the rentals that we see for, the tubes and the kayaks and things. In year one, there will be a net profit. And then as you can see, as it gets up and running and more popular, exponential gains to year 5, looking at $200,000. Half of those will be reinvested into an endowment. The other half will go back into the region. So then we look at what's it going to take to run this new entity, and really trying to streamline costs as much as possible. There will be some shared admin with the Great Outdoors Foundation. We asked the Central Iowa Water Trails team to put together estimated budgets for us for the next 3 years. So when we're talking with cities, we know what we're talking about here. The initial consultants recommended a split of 70% public funding, 30% private. When we look at how that breaks down, the first year budget, which begins July of 2021, which is approaching soon, and with the weather this weekend, seems like July is really around the corner. We're looking about 1.1 million. And then the portion we're asking from our jurisdictions is 786,000 for the first year. That'll go up a little bit, but then come down as things get streamlined, as the different portions are put in. We see that coming down, and also being supplemented by the downtown sites. So of that 70% jurisdictional support, we talked at length with the working group on what's equitable, what's fair, how should this be divided? And they came down to a funding formula based on 3 weighted factors. That's drainage area at 25%, access points at 25%, and population at 50%. So how that relates to the entire region, you can see here kind of above that 786 line are all of the cities with access points. Windsor Heights, you're just a little bit over 7,800. Those cities below are cities that are adjacent cities, but do not have their own access point, but may choose to buy in as a partner city because they see the benefits of what this will do for the region and for their residents specifically. For instance, Norwalk, we don't have everybody confirmed one way or another, but we do know that Norwalk is going to be a part of this, and are working through talks with all of the cities, including you. So that is a brief overview of the 28E agreement. Our next steps, we're following up with all of our jurisdictions, getting feedback, hearing concerns, bringing that back to the governance committee. we ask you to take a look at this with your legal departments and see if there's any concerns there. And we would like for these to be signed by each jurisdiction in July. And if we could have an indication sometime this month on where each city is feeling as far as what pressure points are there, what do we need to do to make this easier? And of course, we'll get into the governance in 1 second. But before we get into who is making these decisions and on the board, can we answer any questions about the maintenance and funding?
Thank you. This is Teresa Harms. I'm just a quick question. In all of the materials provided, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time or place to ask the question, but I don't see anything about water quality. And so is that something that is going to be built in as far as who's responsible? How is it addressed? So if here, or if you're going to talk about it somewhere else, please just give me, I just would like some guidance on that. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. Go ahead, Hannah. I was going to turn it to you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a couple of ways that is being addressed. First of all, there were 10 new monitoring stations that were put in based upon the concept of Central Iowa water trails in key places. Those are being monitored and handled through Polk County Conservation's Water Quality Monitoring Initiative. Additionally, Polk County Conservation has embarked on 2 separate data collections to provide baseline for us to be able to formulate a way for an entity, whether it's Polk County Conservation or the DNR, that's being decided now, to communicate risk levels to individuals. So the 2 pieces of data that we're looking at right now have to do with recreational water quality and risk tolerance. And so we can go into that more either here or offline, whatever you prefer. I mean, it's a pretty detailed conversation. So that's one way in which water quality is being addressed. Additionally, and then the other way that they're working is that they're coordinating with all the other entities that do current water quality monitoring within this system and starting to put that data together and then trying to figure out a way forward of how that will be communicated to users. Additionally, as far as actual water quality practices, each of these have water quality practices built within them. Additionally, we have now started conversations and projects with upstream partners to try to accelerate on-land water quality initiatives within our watershed. So one example is the investment made by Central Iowa Water Trails into this project was used by Agricultural Clean Water Alliance and Iowa Soybean within federal grants. And we were able to leverage an additional $10 million to our watersheds specifically that are being used for private lands conservation. And then there's additional projects that we're working on right now that will stay, that project as we move into this entities, those projects will stay a priority and a committee within Central Iowa Water Trails, but also will grow to include some other organizations.
Great, thanks. And I'm curious about how then, so you put out the spreadsheet that has the projected revenue. So I guess my question is, have you thought about how, I mean, because everything moves downstream, right? And so I'm glad to hear that you're doing things upstream, but the question is if that doesn't change and the water quality continues to dissipate, then you're not going to have, and what people are, you're not going to have the revenue, I guess is my point, right? I mean, you're making the based on today, not on tomorrow's projections, not based on tomorrow's, water, water quality. And so I guess that's a bit of my concern. I mean, I should note that I'm a huge proponent of this project, first and foremost, but secondarily, I think that that's a big concern. And I hope, I'm obviously not part of your conversations, but I hope that that is something that you guys are putting, thought in, and that is a consideration of your budget projections. I'm glad to see that, it's a break even and make money even in the first year. But I do have significant concerns. As Iowa's contributions through the Des Moines and Raccoon rivers into the dead zone in the Gulf are significant and serious. And that all starts north of us and it moves downstream. And I think that is something that we need to just be very cognizant of. If we're in a situation where, I understand that recreation water quality is different than drinking water quality, but it's still, there are serious and major issues going on. And so I just wanted to make sure that one, I assumed is probably something you guys are talking about, but two, I guess I'm just curious of whether or not that's been taken into consideration based on your projections. If you based your projections on what's happening in Michigan, do they have similar types of issues or challenges? And then did you account for that?
Yeah, so part of our revenue stream when it was conducted took into account flooding and other issues as well as weather and things like that into what that looks like for how those numbers would come through. Furthermore, we're hopeful that with the additional spending, not just within Central Iowa Water Trails for actual water quality initiatives, but the ability to provide additional funding for water quality within our watershed, as well as increased coordination that's happening due to this project and in partnership with others, that we can help move that needle more quickly. And certainly to this point, we've seen evidence that that's what's happening. And as far as like the Great Outdoors Foundation, that was a primary concern and reason for getting involved in this project alone. We've seen across the country where recreation provide a catalyst to real change. And thus the board at Great Outdoors Foundation felt that this was a way to contribute to moving Iowa ahead in our water quality movement. And so I think when as you know, Councilwoman Harms, this is not an easy or simple task to do. However, the increased coordination and cooperation and collaboration that is allowed through a project like this is providing some inroads that we haven't seen within the last couple years. And certainly we have room to do more, and that's what we're hoping to do, and would always welcome help and guidance and assistance through involvement in our Environmental Conservation Committee.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate your sharing on that topic in more detail, just because I know it's a big issue and one that, is on, that is trying to be tackled ongoing. But I think it's real for this project in particular, that we recognize that if this is going to move forward, that we've got to think about what's happening north of us.
Certainly.
I have just a few questions if you're done, Therese. So what would you say, like the estimated cost to Windsor Heights for the maintenance and repair that you talked about? And then will we need to do anything to Walnut Creek to make this waterway usable? Because sometimes we have water and other times we don't, or we don't have much water. So what is the expectation on Windsor Heights? Is that something that we would have to do? Or would it just be shut down if there's no water?
Yeah, so Windsor Heights does have a proposed access point right there at Colby, and I think that there is some work that needs to be done to make that to make that happen. It includes a variety of other things, like proposed things that include some soft trails and some of those water quality initiatives that we talked about, including, I believe it's a wetland reconstruction with interpretive signing, and as well as some stream bank stabilization. I believe the Windsor Heights estimate for your site is just under $1 million. I believe it's 900,000. However, I think there's two important notes with that. Is this is a proposed site, and certainly at the how Windsor Heights feels that they want to move forward for that site. The on-water maintenance and being part of this regional entity will not be dictated of whether your site is in or when it comes in. So they're not, that investment does not need to be made. Furthermore, it's probably going to be somewhat of a cost share scenario, and those conversations are unique to each jurisdiction as we get into that. Certainly, some jurisdictions have already started their projects or finished their projects. Some have asked for assistance. We do have a $5 million fund that has been funded that allows us to use grants to help regional jurisdictions bring on their sites more quickly, as well as grant sources in which we would be assisting with grant writing. And when you look specifically at Windsor Heights project, because, and another side note, all of these projects were built upon the Watershed Management Authority plans. And so when we could, we layered in those plans to help accelerate or provide additional funding. And so there would be assistance in that piece as well. As far as Windsor Heights plans of when that would come on, I would have to defer to Dennis. If that's been talked about within the council or not. And so that's how that part works. We would be providing on-water maintenance, but I think the important piece about Windsor Heights piece is whether the water was low or high. Clive is certainly in the same position upstream on Walnut Creek, is that there are parts of that project that would be usable even when water levels were low.
Okay. And what do you mean by on-water maintenance? What exactly does that entail?
Very good question. So the removing of strainers, snags, log jams, things like that. The way that the Maintenance and Operations Committee has written that is that there would be a spring clean out, and then there are standards for high water events and on call as needed throughout the year.
And then what happens, since we're kind of prone to flooding in that area at times, what does that do? Would that be something that if we flood, that we would again be responsible for fixing the site or whatever you want to call it to get into the water?
Yes. So for the on-water piece, whatever flooding happens on water, the Central Iowa Water Trails entity would be required to clean that up. As far as the site within Windsor Heights, all regional entities are responsible, or all entities are responsible for their own maintenance on land. It is important to note that all of these, we've learned a lot of how to build these in flood prone areas. And so they would be built to be meant to be flooded, and we try to build those in a way that design those in a way that are easy to clean up and adhere to maintenance standards and maintenance vehicles or machinery that the entities already have. But that is just part of the outdoor recreation in Iowa. We know these creeks are going to flood, and they need to do that, and so that's part of the way that we design them.
Okay. I think that pretty much sums up my questions there. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We will go ahead and move on to the governance, and any other questions that come up, we can continue answering them tonight, or we're always available too. So in addition to what it's going to cost, the other question is always who is going to be making these decisions and what is my voice? And so while we brought forward the 28E agreement, which has consensus from the working group, the composition is still a work in progress of what this board looks like, and another reason why we are before you tonight. So looking at the general board overview, we're looking at 3-year terms which will be staggered initially, so we don't have one big turnover in 3 years. No more than 30 members, because I think we can agree that's probably big enough. The representation will reflect the funding mix, and this is something that we heard loud and clear in those initial interviews with our city managers, is that that's something that in looking at other entities would be smart to have as we're building this from the ground up. So there will be 70% public officials as well as 30% private representatives. Those jurisdiction representatives will be appointed by the mayor and will be elected officials, and our county representatives will be from the Board of Supervisors. Our private reps will be nominated by the executive committee, first by the Central Iowa Water Trails LLC, and then ongoing by the executive committee of this entity. So looking a little more specifically, what is proposed right now, and we're gathering feedback and tweaking constantly, is one representative from each city with an access point. So that would be one from Windsor Heights. What we've heard is that Des Moines would like 2, and have had a fairly positive response to Des Moines having 2. We want to get your response to that. One collective representative for our partner cities. Those are those cities without an access point. 2 representatives from Polk County and 1 each from Dallas and Warren counties. If you'll remember that map that Hannah showed at the beginning, almost the majority is within Polk County. We'll have someone from the Polk County Conservation, 1 non-voting member from the Great Outdoors Foundation, 1 non-voting representative from the DNR. So we have those voices there. And then 7 community leaders to reflect a inclusive collective voice of the regional trails network. And looking at those private representatives, there'll be 7 community leaders nominated by the executive committee with recommendations from supporting committees. Consideration will be given to individuals who reflect the private funding mix, water trails user groups, and diverse communities, and they will either reside or work in Polk, Warren, or Dallas counties. The executive committee is still very much a work in progress, and we're defining what the roles of that executive committee are. As it stands right now in the very latest draft of the bylaws, the executive committee will not have quite as much power for those of you who are familiar with the MPO, but be able to make decisions between that $5,000 and $20,000 mark in between board meetings. When there's something that needs immediate attention, they'll also nominate those private representatives. So those are their 2 main tasks. They will include the officers, which hold 2-year terms, as well as the chairs from our standing committees. And that's finance, operations and maintenance, inclusion, environmental conservation, again, making sure that that water quality is always top of mind, and safety will be a part of that as well, which is not listed here, but feedback that we've heard from our jurisdictions. So then that brings us to the next steps of the board composition. We are making adjustments based on feedback we're hearing from all of our councils, bringing that back to the governance committee. They meet again next Monday. So we'll take the feedback we hear from you tonight or in the interim back to them. Then we will finalize the structure and a new nonprofit will be formed. Those appointments will be made by mayors and boards of supervisors, and this new entity, the new board, will begin regular meetings in July of 2021. So with that, that is what we wanted to share with you, and we'll open it up to questions on governance or anything left outstanding on the 28E as well. Any additional questions for us while you've got us tonight?
And of course, you can always email us. I think the important date is that we do have that meeting next week. So we would want to take any feedback that you had to that. So if you would email Nikki or myself before then, we can make sure that the working group and committee have that feedback to consider.
And I'll reiterate that we know this is a lot to take in, and your council needs to have a conversation about this, and everyone kind of has a different level of understanding of where they have been in this process. What we are just hoping for sometime in this month of April is just really just a pulse check. Where is your council feeling in terms of Windsor Heights involvement? What can we do to make sure this is a mutually beneficial agreement? Because as Hannah said, as we kicked off, this is something we see for the region as a regional benefit. It will work when we're all a part of it, but together we have a chance to make sure we're building something that works for all of us too. So we want your feedback there and really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for the ladies? I guess we're good. Thanks, Nikki. Hannah,
Thank you. Have a good night.
you bet. Next item is consider approval of the agreement between the city and metro area firefighters and EMS of Central Iowa, IAFF Local 5274 for a 3-year union contract with the full-time fire department personnel.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I guess I just,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has. We discussed this in the exempt session at the last meeting, and nothing has changed since then. So
I guess I just want to make sure that I saw in here that all of everybody is being treated basically the same if they're union or non-union. And then we received this signed copy after the last city council meeting, correct? That's when we received that copy, right?
that's correct. I actually received a signed copy after the last city council meeting. It was the council meeting was Monday. I received it Tuesday, and then council got it, I believe, the same day. So, and yes, the provisions outlined in there do make sure that there's equity among everybody, regardless of whether they're part of the union or not. That was something that I was pretty set on ensuring.
Thank you.
Chad, looking at the contract here, or the proposal, it says that the rates that were proposed, that being the wage rates, were developed using what were labeled comparable communities, and those were reference points. Is that right?
Sorry, I'm going back and forth between the PDF. Yes, the union in their initial proposal brought us a spreadsheet of what they use for comparables. I self-validated those to make sure that the numbers were accurate, and then we developed a that outlines where everybody was and where we fit within that, which is where you get the positions for the paramedics and the EMTs.
And it wasn't any sort of formula or anything. It was just sort of looking at these other communities, and then, coming up with numbers of our own or their own.
Correct.
Okay. So with that said, my understanding, at least the bargaining group, their position is that the city of Des Moines, which has a population of 215,000 people, land area of 80 square miles. The city of Cedar Rapids, which has a population of 132,000 people, a land area of 70 square miles. Ames, which has a population of 66,000 people, a land area of 24 square miles. And West Des Moines, population 65,000 people, land area of 38 square miles, are comparable to Windsor Heights, population 4,900, land area of 1.4 square miles.
I think you mischaracterized that a little bit, Mr. Jones. It's not necessarily that they're comparable, they're competitors. And so while they are larger organizations, those are where we lose people to when they leave because the pay is better, the benefits are better. So comparable, no. Competitor, yes.
So the ask then, or the argument, is that we need to adopt these rates because these other jurisdictions who just happen to be at the very least 3 times the size of ours are paying those rates.
No, I think that the argument is that the union brought us what they felt they needed to be paid. And we came back to them with what we felt was a more reasonable number to be competitive in the market and keep people from a retention and be able to recruit within our agency. As you know, we have firefighters currently being paid $13 an hour, which is well below where they need to be. And if we're not competitive, then we're going to be this cycle of no retention and no recruitment that we've seen in the past. And of course, there's a cost to training and recruiting new personnel. There's a cost to that lack of experience. All that goes into it.
I recognize that. My concern is that when you say, $13, that's not even close to where it needs to be in relation to our competitors.
Where it needs to be for us to be able to retain people and attract people. So yes, in relation to competitors. If we're not competitive, we're not going to get good people in the door to do the job.
And again, determining our competitors or our market is our neighbors, more or less.
That's correct.
Okay.
Chad, now the negotiating or bargaining unit is the union, correct?
That's correct. It's the 6.
Okay.
Well, the collective bargaining covers the 6 full-time employees. Not all 6 of them are part of the union, but that's what it covers.
Yeah. But I mean, they're negotiating for entire, just not Windsor Heights, are they?
No, this is specific to Windsor Heights. Each
Okay.
faction of the collective bargaining group negotiates their own. So for instance, Norwalk went through the process similar to this at the same time we did. And they, of course, bargained with the city of Norwalk for theirs. So.
Hey, Chad, are the percentages similar to each city?
I don't understand your question.
Well, the wage increases and the benefit plans.
So what we've laid out in this is the initial wage plan, which we don't have currently because we're in the midst of that. So I don't have an answer for that. As far as benefits, they're comparable to our competitors. Yes.
Okay. I mean, you just don't pull those things out of the air. You mean they're.
No, absolutely. And there's been, Matt Brick can tell you, Dennis can tell you, there's a ton of research that goes into this. There's a ton of, everybody knows I love spreadsheets. There's a ton of spreadsheets that have been put together on this that we've, compared different things, different avenues, different possibilities, and what we feel is most fiscally responsible for the city while also taking care of our people and being a competitor.
Okay, so then you negotiate with the union who represents like 6 people?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, got it.
Chad, were we ever, I think I know the answer, but I just want to clarify, were we ever provided any sort of information with regards to what sort of turnover or concerns you had about staff retention as part of advocating for the passage of this agreement?
In this specific agreement, I don't know if we've had that discussion, but I have discussed wages and turnover my entire tenure here, both on the police side and the fire side.
I think my final question, if nobody else is going to speak. The recommendation is putting a paramedic firefighter step 1 pay at $19.55. That means that they'd be making more than people employed by Ankeny, Grimes, Johnston, Newton, and for now, Urbandale. Is that right?
No, that's actually incorrect. The fiscal 22, which starts July 1st of 21, sets the step 1 pay for a paramedic at $18.85.
Okay.
You're looking at fiscal year 23, I think, for the 1955 number.
So what is the 5 lower than Windsor Heights then?
Give me a second to pull up my sheet and I can tell you. It'll take just a second to get it. It's loading, so apologize.
It's not a gotcha or quiz chat. It looks 1885 number for paramedic and firefighter. It looks like that would be then Johnston, Newton, and for now, Urbandale. But I would note that that doesn't seem to I think this is jumping around because it says the proposed contract sets the paramedic firefighter step 1 at 1955, which is close to the midpoint of all departments surveyed, with 5 agencies paying less and 5 agencies paying more.
If I put 1955 on the action form, that's incorrect because like I said, if you look at the wage scale, it's 1885 on the first year. So that would be a mistype if that's what I put on the page. So yes, if you look at the scale, so 1885, I'm sorry. If you look at the pay scale on the last page of the union contract, it outlines what the pay is. So that's a typo. It's 1885 for fiscal year 22, starting step 1 for the paramedic. And so that would mean that we are below Altoona, Ankeny, Cedar Rapids, Clive, Des Moines. We're above Johnston. We're below Grimes. We're above Newton, above Urbandale, and below West Des Moines. Does that answer your question?
With that explanation and clarification, yes.
Chad, does that surprise you, that ranking there that you just read?
Oh, I knew we were way low, so no, it really does not.
Well, but the downside kind of surprises me, the ones that are below us.
When it comes to wages, honestly, nothing surprises me anymore. So.
Okay. It's just an observation that it seems like we're at the midpoint, essentially. Close to the midpoint.
So yeah, according to the council action form, you know, the paramedics would be right at the midpoint. There's 5 above, 5 below, and the EMTs would be 3rd from the lowest paying.
Okay. I have no questions on this.
Chad, thanks for all your work on this. I know it's been a point of consternation for a long time. As you said, I know you've been working on it since you got here, and it was an issue before then. So hence why we actually are being presented with this agreement at this juncture, and they chose to go this direction, I think, was because there was not traction the other way. So anyways, I know you did a lot of good work, so thanks for your efforts.
Any further comments or discussion?
Have we made a motion, Dave, already?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Hearing nothing further, roll call.
Mr. LaFredo,
Yes.
Susan Skerrys,
Yes.
Teresa Harms,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
No.
Joseph Jones.
Yes.
Next item is consideration of change order number 2, 2020 street improvement project, Allison and 69th. Dennis, I think you made comments relative to this earlier in an email. Do you want to go ahead and discuss this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, staff and I were preparing for the construction season to start again this month. And when we were talking about strategies for restoration, one idea that we bantered around in the conference room was the idea of providing council information on an enhanced restoration effort. And considering the stories that I've heard from staff on past restoration projects and how things have sometimes not gone the best, we thought we would have this in our back pocket to use in case we ran into a stretch of inclement weather where water was scarce, or if we turned up that we needed to bring in some upgraded soil for certain properties. We wanted to be prepared for that. And so you can see tonight's items C and D on your agenda are simply just Justin's change order proposal if the council were to ever look at doing any of these things. But as I said in my email, the staff does not support implementing any of these change orders because we think we can do them under the current contract that meets the SUDES guidelines for restoration. So I bring these to you this evening just for discussion to see if there's any interest in pursuing an enhanced restoration project, or if not, sticking with the same whatever's in the contract for now and keeping this information in our back pocket in case we need it.
Dennis, I had sent you an email earlier. Hopefully you had a chance to read it. Because it's been a trouble spot in the past, whether it was Sunset or Del Metro or some of the other streets. Neighbors complaining, residents complaining about their yards being torn up and it wasn't ever restored. And part of the issue is, as I mentioned in that email to you, some of the residents, particularly 2 or 3 that I talked to on Del Metro, said that they were told not to water the seedings. Didn't make sense to me, but that's what they said that they were told. And so I would suggest that we encourage the residents to water the reconstructed area that is being seeded, because when we get in a hot stretch, it needs watering. And the contractors are not good at following through on that. And so past experience tells me, I think it'd be wise to encourage homeowners to water, because it's not a big expense, to water the repaired parts of their yard.
I agree with you 100%. The discussion was pretty short in the conference room. It was, what do we do in the contract for restoration? And there's a certain period of time that's in the contract for watering. If the weather does not cooperate with our plan to do that watering period, then what would we do? And so Justin put that information together on what we could do to address those issues if they came up. And I said, basically, let's give this to the council so they have this information as background. But it's incumbent upon staff and the engineer to make sure that the contractor performs to the standards of the contract. And so that includes watering, that includes cleaning up trash. That was one of the other items that has been discussed. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that they fulfill their commitment. And Mike, that's a good idea.
Well,
I'm not going to say why that may have happened in the past, but the first thing I would do is to tell every property owner, go out and water the grass and make sure that.
and I think they need to be encouraged to do so, because as much as might be part of the contractor's agreement, invariably they don't follow through on that. And so I save some problems, get to the residents and let them know we'd appreciate it if they would water their lawns after it's restored. And so I think it's pretty simple, and I think our residents are very cooperative about matters like that. So that's just what I'm suggesting.
We also told them that we were going to purchase watering cans for any council members that wanted to use them and walk up and down the street.
I suppose you're going to also carry a watering can.
Yeah.
Right? You
Yes,
and the rest
no,
of
I
the
agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more on what everything you
because we live here, and some of you don't live here, but you carry watering cans, and are probably most of you are younger than me.
Every day.
So you could carry 2 of them, Dennis.
No, I could, maybe 4.
Okay. Well, then thanks for volunteering.
Dennis, I'm always happy to help out our residents in any way that I can. If that means a watering can or 2, I'm happy to do it. But actually, I think one of the points that Mr. Lafredo said that I think is super important in this conversation is that we need to communicate with the residents what the expectations are. And I think that that's where we have failed miserably in the past. And so I think that that's probably one of the key components, and one of the things I think you've heard me harp on since you've been here, and that was a point of consternation last fall as well, is communicating what's going to happen, being ahead of the ball game, and letting them know what they can expect and what the expectations are of them. And so I don't see, I'm glad to see these from the perspective that you're thinking ahead. It's refreshing. So thank you so much. But as you said, I'm not sure that this needs to happen as long as we communicate and we set expectations, not only with residents about what they can expect and how it's going to work and their role and our role and all those sorts of things, but secondarily, also with our contractors and holding them accountable, because that's not always happened either. And so I think as long as we can have communication and accountability, then I think this should self-resolve. If not, I appreciate you thinking ahead and kind of putting this on the radar. And if we do need to be more proactive, then it's good to know that we have a plan, or one that we can consider moving forward. So thank you.
Teresa, I disagree with that it won't self-resolve. We've experienced that, and it will repeat itself, and the contractors are stubborn, and so we've seen it on those streets that I mentioned, and it's just a matter of, we've got great residents and asking for their cooperation, keeping it watered. And so that's what I'm suggesting. Period. No watering cans. I mean, hoses and watering it with over a sprinkler would work great.
This is Matt Weir, 6501 Allison Avenue. When it came to restoring the western half of Allison, they did not start it until they were already starting to tear up the eastern part. We got all the residents from the eastern part parking on the western half, and it caused the houses on the north side not to be watered properly through that whole thing. Watering crews were out here every day, but when they had to go around cars, they would squirt a little bit from each side and then continue on. So I really hope the city this year holds them accountable.
Yeah, and we've tried in the past, sir, about that, and it's an ongoing process, because they're not usually real cooperative in that, from my past experience here in Windsor Heights. And so
the additional watering considerations, my understanding is they're not like guaranteed, right? They're if needed, so they could potentially not be needed.
Correct.
Okay. That was the only of these options, you know, my understanding is that it's supposed to be put back in, you know, the same or near the same condition. I think the difference between what a resident may consider the same condition, considering I lived on Del Metro, and what Sudis considers the same, are two different things. The only thing I was going to, I guess, ask the council to consider, if anything, was the additional watering, because I think the biggest thing to getting the property back to normal is obviously the grading. But then the second thing is hiding all of the, you know, the land and replanting the grass. And I remember not only Del Metro, but I think along 64th, that was a big issue with regrowing the hydro seed. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it had to be done again, at least multiple times.
I'm sad too, Mike.
So that was what I was going to ask the council to, you know, consider, because it doesn't seem to me like we have to commit to that if they don't do it. It's all weather dependent, but having that proactive step as far as watering the grass would probably be a good idea, not only on Allison, but I think everywhere.
I agree. Yeah, I think, again, I've got a lot of faith in our residents that they'll take care of it.
This is
If we
Jeremy
encourage you to
Brennan,
do so.
6425 Allison. And no offense to what you were just saying, Mr. Lafredo, but I find what you just said a little bit offensive. I agree that we have great residents here in Windsor Heights. And to be honest with you, I'm very happy where I'm living now. And to be honest with you, this has probably been one of the nicest neighborhoods I've ever lived in, and I want to keep it that way. However, the excuse that the contractors typically balk and we don't do anything to hold them accountable has me really concerned for fiscal responsibility with this city, with this council. If you're saying that because you've had a hard time doing it in the past, that we shouldn't try to make sure that they're doing it in the future or hold their feet to the fire. I deal with federal contracts day in and day out. There are multiple options that are available for that.
I'm not saying that.
The contractors are doing it.
Okay, I didn't.
But I don't think that it should be put to the responsibility of
I didn't say
the
it's
house owners.
obviously a volunteer effort on the part of the residents. I mean, if it dries out and the grass doesn't grow, so be it. And
Right.
you know, there are, and we've done it in the past, going back at the contractor, but the bottom line, the grass just doesn't grow, and so.
Well, going to what Mr. Jones had said too about, you know, that this is an option if something doesn't happen. I agree that should be held in the pocket, you know, from the city council standpoint. But as a resident, you know, when you're talking about what's supposed to be restored to the what was the group that you called SUGNAS?
Yeah,
Sudis.
it's kind of in its previous condition.
Right, to the previous condition. If you took a walk up and down just Allison Avenue when the restorations, I mean, I'm at the end of the west end where they finished up before they moved on to the east side. And I mean, the entire repair work that they did on the end of my driveway is full of concrete. I don't know what else they've used, but the grass is not growing that they sprayed with the hydro seed or grass seed, whichever one it was. And, you know, going to what Matt Weir said, we didn't really see a whole lot of watering that was done. And I agree with that. So I guess my point is, like, you know, putting it back to like condition, like means there was grass growing, there should be grass growing. I don't care if it's not the same grass. I don't care about any of that, but having concrete chunks, things like that to make it where things can't grow. And then also it's saying that it should be the residents' responsibility to go water because the contractor may or may not do what he's supposed to do.
Okay, I'm not saying it's the residents' responsibility. Please understand that. I'm not saying it's the residents' responsibility. It is the contractor's responsibility, but there could be an assist if the resident wants to, on a voluntary basis, is watering it when it's not being watered. That's all I'm suggesting.
And I think from a volunteer standpoint, that's great. But I don't want to take onus for responsibility off the city.
We're not asking you.
They are holding the contractor accountable.
Third
Right,
time,
but
I'm not saying it's a required thing by any means. If you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Okay, let's move on. Any other further comments?
Real quick, I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, if you're still there. Don't log out just yet.
Don't worry, I'm not, my subject hasn't come up.
Okay, I just want to add a brief question. So there were still chunks of concrete and they hydro-seeded over it?
Yes, they did. And actually they did that all along the both sides of the street. If you actually walk down through there, you can see them.
All right, and just because I'd like to do that, where was that? Where is that?
Well, my address is 6425. And if you go all the way down the end on the west side, you can see it all through different parts of the yard, by the mailboxes and things like that all the way down. Now, to be 100% honest with you, Mr. Jones, I don't know if they've completed the restoration on this side. Somebody had told me before that they had completed the restoration on the west end, but they were still needing to do on the east end. And I didn't think that was right from just the conversations we had with the contractors last time. And Dennis, I see your head moving, so I'm assuming that that was a nod that no, they're not ready and they're not finished. And if that's the case, fine, then it may be a moot point at this point. I just want to make sure that, you know, it's not being forgotten whenever they're doing the restoration, just simply because they came out and seeded. And there are some yards that have really taken off and they actually look pretty good, but there's still quite a few along this end of the street that are not.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Let me try to kind of put a period at the end of the sentence on this. Whenever you do these restoration projects, there are a lot of things that happen and they're all different. One property might go gangbusters and one you can't get grass to grow. And what that means is the contractor has to come back in the spring and look at that again and see if there's a solution to that. And, you know, in the photographs that we took of the properties when we started the project, maybe there wasn't grass growing there for a reason. Who knows? But we have to take these into account one by one. And the project is not done by a long shot. We're going to be back in there doing the restoration. And if there's a problem property, we're going to readdress that and make good on what the contract says. And then also, I just wanted to remind, there was Mike Lafredo did mention about encouraging property owners to water. We have done that already with door hangers. So we are not doing it as a matter of it's your responsibility. We're just doing it in a way to say, this is something that you could help with. We are definitely taking full responsibility for ensuring that the contractor will restore the property the way it's supposed to be. And that includes watering. Now, if we get to 2 weeks and we've been watering for 2 weeks and some kind of drought continues to go throughout this and that affects us, we're going to be looking at doing more watering in some way. And that's why I wanted the council to see. The other thing is, you know, a little bit self-serving because it's easy to talk about, hey, let's get somebody out there to do some more watering. But I don't think you can have that conversation without understanding how much it costs. And that's why this information is important for the council to understand that soil replacement and additional watering labor is not cheap. It's expensive. And at some point, the contractor is going to point to us and say, listen, this is outside the scope of work that we originally bid on. So this is going to need a change order. So I'm trying to be responsible. I'm trying to be proactive with the council right now and the citizens to say, we are going to restore the property the way it was when the project started. But there are many challenges ahead and we have to work together to make sure it comes out the way we want it to. And I think we can.
Thank you,
Dennis. Is item D essentially the same as C as far as the watering?
Yes, sir. They're both information items unless the council wants to act on Mr. Jones's suggestion on the watering. The next item would be item E.
Okay.
Dennis, you just said door hangers went out. Where did those go? And can you give us some, I don't know what you're talking about.
I just know that door hangers went out. I can get that information and I can get the schedule of when they were distributed. I can pass that on to the council after this evening, but I just don't have a schedule in front of me.
Okay, no, that's okay. I hadn't heard any of that, so just curious. And then just one last question. Do you have a schedule or have we received a schedule from the contractor on when the work is going to start on each one of the projects? I know this isn't necessarily, I mean, we're talking about the change order for these projects. Well, we are talking about Allison right now, but it's kind of, they're all kind of in the same space or talk about the same thing. Do we have a schedule on when work is going to start? I see university has started again. And then what is our plan for communication? You know how I feel about that to residents and just in general, if we could get an update on that, that'd be great. Thanks.
If you're expecting me to tell you that right now, I can't. I will give it to you, though. I will give you the update. I will remind you that a pretty comprehensive communication plan went out to the council a couple weeks ago. And Teresa, I know that was when you were having problems with your email. So if you haven't seen that yet, then give me a holler and I'll give that out to you again.
All right, thank you.
Next item is consideration of approval for statement of work with Arion to install, set up, and act as the city's Microsoft Cloud solution provider at a cost of $10,290. Chad, or you and Derek want to do that, or Dennis?
I'll take it. So as I would assume council probably is aware, just from your own business and personal worlds, it's harder and harder to find standalone software, and more of this stuff is going to subscription-based, cloud-based. What this is for is a migration to Office 365 versus the standalone software we've been installing on workstations. That also includes Microsoft Teams, as well as Outlook for the city-owned workstations. This won't affect your personal devices at all. This was actually something that is in the approved FY22 budget under the ERP, but we think there may be an opportunity to get this done a little faster. If that's the case, we do have the money in the ERP now to fund this, and then that money would simply replenish this project for the FY22 budget. The ERP is a rolling fund, so we don't have a problem with that. And then as the council action form outlines, on an ongoing basis, this will actually save the city approximately $700 a year over the standalone software that we've been using, and the server upgrades and processes for that. So again, it's something that was planned. We just think we may be able to get it done a little bit faster, and just need to go ahead to move forward with it.
Any other questions on that? Motion.
Move to approve. Thanks for bringing us into the new century.
Second.
My Outlook's from 2016. I'm looking forward to it too.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Susan Skiris,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Next item is Resolution 2021-14, waiving fees for the pavilion for Walnut Creek Church mission to the city on May 30th.
So
They
moved.
come in and put down a bunch of mulch and whatever. Motion to approve.
Moved, Dave. It's moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Susan Skiris,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Next item is Resolution 2021-15, waiving the fees for the Events Center for Windsor Heights Chamber of Commerce on May 27th, where they're doing a, I believe it's a speed meeting opportunity. Motion to approve.
So
So
moved.
moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Susan Skiris,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Next item is Resolution 2021-16, authorizing the City of Windsor Heights to submit an application for funding from the Federal Community Project Funding Program for the partial funding of the reconstruction of 73rd Street.
Move to
Motion to
approve.
approve.
Second.
So moved.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Susan Skiris,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike LaFredo,
Yes.
Mike Jones,
Yes.
and Teresa Harms.
Yes.
Next item is a discussion on sump pump rules, which we've sort of been running around the edges of. So Dennis, you want to start that one off?
Am I supposed to say go?
Echo.
Council's gotten a lot of information from me on this in the past, but I think it basically boils down to whether the council wants to make it mandatory that either by individual property or the city in its entirety, that these sump pumps be required to be connected to our storm system. And you've received some information even in the past, long before my time here, about this issue. Councilmember Skiri's wanted it, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Jones, to make sure that there was a discussion this evening and see if there's any interest in the council moving one way or the other on this. So I'll leave it up to you to have that discussion.
Well, it seems to me, Dennis, it needs to be mandatory for the hookup. The city went to the expense of making it available and trying to improve the street, as some of the speakers reported earlier, that I had an exchange with Matt Brick as he was legally speaking about the issue, and it can be done, and I think it should be done.
Dennis, so I think we've got the opinion more or less that we can do this. My question is I think there was some follow-up with some suggestions about, and I guess I could ask Aaron this or whoever, but it doesn't actually say in chapter 97, that being the stormwater ordinance or chapter, about what sort of the penalty is for failing to comply with it. And it seems to me like there's issues with, I mean, penalties or compliance, because if you just say shall, but you don't provide, if you don't comply with this, then that's our issue. And I think there was probably how it ended was kind of the opinion that this can be done, but perhaps there should be some additions or shoring up of the city code with regards to, enforcement provisions. Would that be fair?
I think so, Mike. When I asked Matt about this, and Aaron, chime in when you want to, but he said that right now under the current code, we could require people to connect, and you would go through a process of demonstrating why that's important. And if they did not comply, then the city could take it upon itself to connect and then charge a fee to the homeowner for that. But he also did say that because the code wasn't very specific, that he would recommend that it be amended to be a little bit more direct and plain. Is that about right, Aaron?
That's correct. So what you have under the current ordinance is the requirement that it be drained and where it can be drained, but there's not the requirement of the connection. And I think some of you will remember when we were talking about the sewer connections and how we did revisions to the ordinance in chapter 96 to address what that connection looks like, what would happen if a property owner doesn't do the connection. It specifically addresses the assessment process. But Mike Jones, to your question about enforcement, any violation of your city ordinances can be, you can enforce it through a municipal infraction. So we have that mechanism in place, but I would recommend, if it's the will of the council, that if you're wanting to take this step to make it mandatory, that we do some revisions to the code to make it very clear what the requirement's going to be. And the other issue we've gotten here is just what does abutting mean? How close do we need to be, the property owner need to be to the infrastructure to make that requirement? So it is unclear, but we can absolutely make the argument as it stands. I think the preference would be that we have some stronger verbiage.
No, I think this is being brought to everyone's attention because of pooling water and potentially damaging roads or other people's property. So just speaking for myself, yeah, if those types of things are happening, then we need to step up and work to enforce those things to prevent them from happening.
Matt, This is Matt Weir,
Make a suggestion.
Allison Avenue. We've contacted the city, and it is about our neighbor who has a sump pump that runs 24/7 onto the road. Beyond just the basics of the city code to that, it's a nuisance. It has created ice buildup along the road, 4 to 6 inches thick, that the city has to come out and clear. During the summer, it causes an algae buildup all the way down the road, about a foot thick, a foot wide at the end of the driveways that you have to walk through, you have to bike through, run your vehicle storage, so you're pulling that up into your driveway. This has gone beyond just inconvenience to a nuisance. And the neighbor in question has been asked to do something about it. He has always given the feed a line of, well, I'm looking into it, or it's not my problem. And since last year, when they put the subdrain right across his front yard to hook into, now he says, well, I'm going to do it, but we have seen no progress. So this is something that needs to be enforced. It's beyond just way to deal with the drain, but it's the actual nuisance. It started deteriorating the road before it got tore up. It deteriorated the end of Jeremy's driveway. And it's already stained the brand new road from his house down to the drain. So this is something that needs to move quickly.
You're 100% correct, and it's been reported before, and the city, through the ordinance change or whatever, needs to enforce it, and it needs to be done tomorrow or sooner. I mean, I've heard this I've heard it a year and a half ago. And so it's not a new problem. It's a problem that has existed and it needs to be addressed. And so I think that's what we're talking about. And there needs to be action, and there needs to be whatever the council can do right now in terms of modifying the ordinance or whatever it takes. But the gentleman who owns that house and refuses to get it done needs to be cited if he doesn't comply. And so that's my thing. I mean, I know you're real tired of having it happen to you, as are the other residents. And I don't blame you one bit. It's been talked about enough. It needs to be dealt with and addressed. In fact, I'm tired of talking about it, and the city needs to do it. It's not that hard, as our attorney just reported. Just get the darn thing taken care of.
So what do we need to do to start this amending or to change, make it more specific on our policy? What's our next step?
I believe you've already spoken enough that Aaron and Dennis can probably go from there.
There's 2 options I think that the council could entertain this evening, and that's just the first easy one is a consensus to direct staff, including the city attorney, to draft up amended language for this to change the code. That's easy. We can come back probably in 2 weeks and have something for you to look at, a draft of that amendment or proposed amendment. But more urgently, if the council wants to, they could make a motion and vote to make it mandatory for that property to hook up within 30 days.
I'll make that motion, Dennis, that second one. And it doesn't negate changing the ordinance, but I think it needs to happen and happen soon. As we get spring rains and that, so I would make a motion.
Mike, before you make that motion, I don't know that it needs council action to do that. I mean, I think if you are directing staff to go look at the issue and determine whether or not there's a nuisance that needs enforcement out there, I don't know that the council needs to make a motion to put that ball in motion.
Okay.
I agree with you, Aaron.
Then I would, for my part of the council, would direct Dennis to get that taken care
I think that the wording that Aaron used is more appropriate to determine whether there is a nuisance. Because this is going
Well,
to,
there
this is
isn't.
not only going to affect just this property, this is going to possibly impact many, many properties throughout the community. And the brief little history lesson that I got about this pointed me back to 80th Street. I think you've been down this road once before. So does the council stop at this property because this is something to get taken care of? Or is there some kind of finding that has to be determined to bring this to some place where the city attorney is satisfied that they can actually defend the action of the council?
Usually when we put in a street and we have those issues, we do put in that separate pipe that they can connect the sump pumps to. There's a lot of properties in Windsor Heights where that does not exist.
Okay, we're talking about just Allison right now.
Oh, I know, but this has broader implications, Mike.
I would like to get this problem solved tonight for the people on Allison right now.
Okay,
I think Aaron gave us direction on that we can just direct the staff to get that taken care of.
Okay.
I think that there are broader implications as well, and we need to think about how it impacts. We need to understand what the implications are for that across the city and what it's going to look like and feel like based on what our current infrastructure is, and what are the implications for each of that, because it doesn't exist in everybody's yard. And so I think Aaron outlined some of those pieces, like how close do you have to be, and all of those sorts of things. And I think we need to have a larger, to make a policy change or code change based on that. I agree that, if there is a way to determine whether or not there's a nuisance on Allison to address that, fantastic, move forward in that direction. But as far as the whole grand, big picture of this, I think that we need to understand what the implications are to the entire city, and understand what the current infrastructure is and what that actually entails and looks like. Thank you.
I see what your point is, and I don't disagree with it, but I think as we redevelop or redo the streets and the sewers, then it comes into play. I mean, I would say other streets that are established are grandfathered in as they are now. That's my feeling on it. You don't go look for trouble. But as we're doing the construction and we're making that available to residents just to tap into it, then I think it's needed that they do so and not infringe on their neighbors or the street. And because I've heard it before, the driveways freeze up, and with the water draining into the driveways as well as the streets. So,
Aaron, what is your suggestion on how to handle this? Because I do want this issue to be cleared up for Allison, because this has been going on since Teresa and I started hearing about this in August, and I don't want to go until this August still dealing with this issue. But I also want to make sure that we are fair and we understand what we are voting or what we are changing into the ordinance. Again, I want this fixed, but I don't want to jump the gun and then have us, oh wait, now we have to redo this policy or add this in or add that in. So I would rather us take our time and do it right, unless you have a different thought, Aaron.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. I think with regard to the current issue on Allison Avenue, I think city staff can go out and make a determination, is this creating a public nuisance? And some of the things I'm hearing tonight, I haven't seen the issue, but the things I'm hearing make me believe that perhaps that is the issue. If there is water standing there, if there's algae growing that can create slip and fall incidents for residents, there's issues that can be addressed with the ordinance that we have to abate that nuisance. The second prong to that is policy-wise, what do you guys want to do as a council? And my suggestion with that would be, what I'm hearing is you want it to be a mandatory requirement if there is infrastructure within so many feet that a property owner is going to connect. And so we can create language for you guys to consider And of course, there's going to be a public hearing and 3 readings, and we're going to have the opportunity to make sure it fits what the needs that you're wanting, and go from there. So I see it as 2 different issues based on the discussion this evening.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Hey, Dennis and Mayor Burgess, if I might here.
Go ahead, Bill.
The utility contractor on that street project also told us that they would make that connection at the cost of $935. I'm not necessarily advocating on that, but if Mr. Oneman up there does fight against this, we're going to spend well over that $935 just in staff and legal time fighting against him. So that's, that's something to consider. If you want the problem to go away in this one situation, just tell us, yeah, pay them the $935. But again, it's kind of setting the precedent. So beware that if you do that for one property on this project, you don't have to do it for anybody else, but it kind of opens a can of worms, So just an alternative to option 1 that Aaron just outlined.
Yeah, it's not a good idea.
Dalton, what kind of time frame would the city have to consider that option?
To direct the contractor to just do the work?
Correct.
I bet you we could have that done in the next week and a half if that's what the council wanted us to do.
No, I mean, how long of a time? If we proceed through citation process, does that option go away at some point or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you start, and this would be probably more a question for you, Aaron, but if we start enforcement, he pushes back and we say, maybe this isn't a conversation for a public meeting, but he pushes back and we got a couple $1,000s in legal fees in it. And then we say, oh, just kidding. We're going to make the connections. Like, why do we even start this in the first place? Which is kind of how we got to this point last summer, is that the code wasn't strong enough. And it was my understanding that we were going to let it be, but that's clear. That's obviously not the case.
Yeah. Okay. Dalton, why don't we talk off script tomorrow about that?
Yep, definitely.
Anything further on this, or I think they've got direction?
Aaron, I'd like to be part of that conversation too.
Yeah, I think that'd be wise, Dennis. We don't want to set precedent, so.
Absolutely. I'll send out a message and we can figure out a time.
So as it stands today, just in summary, to make sure everybody's on the same page, I think that Susan has a good suggestion here this evening that unless it's an emergency, maybe we need to start looking at the policy change to direct all of this going forward from now on, instead of jumping the gun on this one property and then having to backtrack later. So am I hearing that we're going to let Aaron start to work on this amendment and see how quickly we can come back for the council to consider something?
Be my suggestion.
As a resident that's being affected, I'm okay with that as long as the city keeps moving forward. But like Dalton just said, last year you went through this and then you just decided to let be. And so it needs to be continually pushed the whole way through.
Agreed. And this is Jeremy at 6425 Allison. This affects the end of my driveway. It affects the safety of my family when we have the ice building up here in the summer. It's not something I'm going to let go. So it's a situation where I do have an expectation that you guys follow through. And at least if you decide not to do something, you at least communicate that with the residents here on Allison so that we know what we're going to be in for. And the other part of it too is that, I appreciate the fact that this could have lasting ramifications with policy change. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are looking at that from that perspective. And I'm not asking for a citywide policy change, because I understand the impacts that can have. But usually whenever you implement a new regulation or change, do you not usually grandfather that in for the folks that have already been affected? This would be like new going forward. So will that solve the overall problem?
I think what the council's talking about is a policy change to give the city staff the ability to make it mandatory that people connect their sump pumps to the storm system when possible, when it is determined that it created a nuisance. And right now, Aaron has said that the code would allow us to do that. It's just that it's not very strong. And so we want to address that issue.
Dennis,
And it's directing me to do something. I want to reassure both Jeremy and Matt that something's going to happen. The council's going to have something to consider.
Dennis, I would like to reassure the residents too, because again, it's before even when Susan was saying she first heard about it. It's not a new problem. And so they've been very patient, and I don't disagree with anything that you're saying or that Aaron is saying. But I think it needs to be on a rapid course of getting it done, whatever that means. Because God bless them, they have been very patient about this thing. And so.
I've heard you, this won't languish.
Pardon?
I have heard you, this won't languish.
What language?
I'll have something very quick for the council to consider.
Okay, yeah, I just.
All right.
you
I
need to
think
have-
that's taken care of.
Not doing this for me, doing it for the residents.
Okay, let's move on. Council reports, Therese,
I don't have anything.
Mike Jones,
Nothing from me.
Mike Alfredo,
No,
Joseph Jones.
We'll have a DART meeting tomorrow and more to come after that.
Okay. Susan,
I don't have anything. I do just have a question. I have in my notes that there would be a change order brought to us about the intersection of 73rd and University. Just kind of wondering where we're at with that, if we looked into it or kind of where we're at.
Susan, we're not going to be bringing a change order. I already signed it last week to get it on the schedule because I didn't want it to take long. So what we did is we got the contractor lined up. We got in their schedule. We did all our DOT stuff that Justin has to do so that we can work in the roadway. And they're scheduled to do that work Thursday or Friday this week.
Thank you for the update.
And I saved that because I knew you would ask.
Aw, am I that predictable?
I have one thing. I've been asked to provide a suggestion to Polk County Homeless Coordinating Council. They're expanding that out, and they would like to have a few other places other than Des Moines, Polk County, and West Des Moines be members. I would like to recommend that Joseph do that because he was a part of the IFA, which was prelude to this particular committee. If I hear no objections, then I will make that nomination to Russ Trimble, who's the head of it for City of West Des Moines.
I have no problem with Joseph doing that. I just am not familiar with what you're talking about and what that entails. I mean, great to have Joseph on board. I just am curious what it is.
I will supply that to you, and so will he through me as soon as we get more information on it. But this is just a recommendation to do that, and we'll see what it all comes out at. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Roll call.
Susan Skerrys,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Mike Lafredo,
yes.
Mike Jones. and-
Yes.
And Teresa Harms.
Yes.